My name is Emma Blake, and I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who caused a scene at her sister's wedding. But then again, I never thought my sister would build her fairy tale life by quietly destroying mine. It was a golden evening in Santa Barbara, the kind you see in bridal magazines, white roses everywhere, a string quartet playing softly under twinkle lights. Guests floated in couture dresses and linen suits sipping champagne, posting stories tagged, "Had Lila and Ben forever." My sister Lila, the bride, glowed at the center of it all, and our mother Veronica beamed like she'd just been named Queen of California. During the reception, my mother raised her glass. Her voice rang with confidence and pride. She said, "To the daughter who truly deserves everything." The room erupted in applause. Lila smirked, glowing in her designer gown. I wasn't even sitting at the family table. My seat was tucked at the far end next to a florist's assistant and someone's third cousin who had flown in from Denver. No name card. No acknowledgement. I swallowed the burn in my throat. I stood up slowly, every pair of eyes turning toward me. "You'll remember this day," I said, looking straight at Lila and our mother, "just not for the reason you think." An hour later, every phone in the ballroom lit up with a notification. My short film had gone live 8 minutes long, pre-scheduled to premiere across every major social platform. 1 hour later, every fake smile in the room shattered. But let me take you back. Before the wedding. Before the truth. Back to when I still believed we were a family. Back to when I thought Lila loved me. Let me show you what it took for me to finally speak. I was born first. Emma Blake, the quiet one. Lila came 3 years later, screaming her way into the world and never really stopped being loud after that. Our childhood home in the Bay Area was a mid-century house with lemon trees out back and a mother who wanted everything perfect. Veronica Blake wasn't a bad mother, not exactly. She kept us fed, dressed, and in the right schools. But she was the kind of woman who loved mirrors, and Lila was her favorite reflection. From a young age, Lila sparkled. She had golden curls and a smile people commented on in grocery store aisles. I was the girl with flyaway brown hair who read books at recess. Lila danced in pageants. I built science kits. Our dad, Jack Blake, tried to cheer me on, helped with my science fair projects, and came to my school plays. But it was clear who the star was. My mother used to joke, "Well, Emma's the brain, but Lila's the brand." Lila got her first ring light at 13, and by 15 had a local following on YouTube. By 17, she was being paid to review makeup clothes and detox teas. She dropped out of college during her sophomore year to focus on her personal brand. Our mother didn't just approve, she helped rebrand it. Meanwhile, I graduated from film school, working my way through freelance editing jobs and small grants. My documentaries were shown at indie festivals, quiet, thoughtful pieces on underreported stories. They won some recognition, but never the spotlight, not the kind Lila was used to. There were years I tried to stay close. I directed a few of her early lifestyle videos before she could afford a full crew. I offered tips when she wanted to pivot from fashion to social impact content, but she always looked at my ideas like I'd offered her tap water at a champagne bar. Still, we had moments. We exchanged birthday gifts, we FaceTimed on holidays. I helped babysit her dog when she went on press tours. I even cried when she got engaged to Ben Dorsey, a startup founder turned media darling with a square jaw and a sharp suit. For years, I tried to believe we were close, that I was the solid sister and she was the star, and that maybe that could be okay. I thought Lila appreciated me, maybe even looked up to me. But then things began to change. My first big grant for a mental health documentary was revoked without explanation 2 weeks before production. I was devastated. It had taken months to secure funding, and suddenly it was gone. The foundation said they had concerns about professional reputation. No further explanation. Not long after, a gossip blog posted a blind item about a woke filmmaker who was caught manipulating footage in an unethical way. The details didn't match my documentary, but they came uncomfortably close. I ignored it at first, but a few acquaintances sent me the article with raised eyebrows. Then my boyfriend of 2 years, Marco, abruptly ended things. After a strange argument, he said he didn't feel he could trust me, though he couldn't name why. 2 weeks later, his photography project was featured in one of Lila's Instagram campaigns. She never mentioned it. One evening, I called my mom. I cried. I told her I felt like things were unraveling. I hoped for sympathy. Instead, she said, "Sweetheart, maybe you're just not cut out for that world. Not everyone is meant to chase the spotlight." And that's when something broke inside me. It wasn't just that I'd been overlooked. It was the realization that my mother had always viewed me as the backdrop to Lila's life. That winter, I moved back from LA to Oakland, subletting a small apartment near Lake Merritt. I needed space, to breathe, to think. I began seeing an old professor for career mentoring. Her name was Dr. Wren. She was the first person to suggest that maybe what I was experiencing wasn't just bad luck, but sabotage. "Emma," she said gently over coffee one afternoon, "what if someone is deliberately trying to dim your light?" I laughed. Like who, Lila? I couldn't even take the idea seriously. But the seed was planted. Then a friend forwarded me a TikTok, a short satirical clip poking fun at privileged documentarians who exploit trauma. The video had gone viral. I watched it once, then twice. It used footage from one of my short films selectively edited and overdubbed with mocking voiceover. The username wasn't Lila's, but the aesthetic, the timing, the stylistic touches. It screamed her influence. I still remember the cold wave of realization that followed. If Lila had mocked me publicly, even just with plausible deniability, what else might she have done behind closed doors? Still, I said nothing. I stayed quiet. I focused on healing. I started working on a new script about women whose careers were derailed by invisible sabotage. I told myself it was inspired by stories I'd heard, but really it was about me. Then came the wedding announcement. A 4-page digital invitation with custom animation and a video montage. I wasn't asked to be a bridesmaid, just a guest. The +1 box was left unchecked. I RSVP'd yes anyway. Not because I wanted to go, but because I needed to see something for myself. And as it turned out, I saw far more than I bargained for. 3 months before the wedding, my luck collapsed completely. One after another, opportunities slipped through my fingers, and at the time, I still clung to the idea that maybe it was just a rough season. It started with the Berkeley Doc Fund, a private endowment I had worked for over a year to get access to. I was shortlisted, then told that I had presented ethical red flags. No specifics, just that phrase. When I asked for clarification, I was told they had decided to move in a different direction. Within a week, the fund announced a partnership with a media company Lila had recently collaborated with for a campaign about feminine resilience. Then my Vimeo account was suspended without notice due to copyright concerns. I appealed and the videos were restored, but not before they were offline for 2 weeks, long enough to miss the deadline for a major competition. And then came the press story. An online magazine ran a piece titled "The Dark Side of Social Impact Filmmaking." It didn't name me directly, but it mentioned a female filmmaker in the Bay Area who had been reprimanded for manipulating subjects' narratives. The timeline and descriptors pointed unmistakably in my direction. I called the publication to refute the claim. No one returned my messages. The day the article ran, my email exploded. Festival organizers pulled me from panels, sponsors froze funds, and the worst part, even friends started keeping their distance. I could feel it, the shift, the weight of suspicion even in silence. Lila called me that night, voice honeyed with concern. "Are you okay?" she asked sweetly. "That article was so unfair. People are just jealous of your integrity." She paused. "If it helps, I could post something supporting you. I have the reach. Just say the word." I thanked her, but declined. Something about the offer didn't sit right. It felt like someone offering a bandage for a wound they had just inflicted. Later that week, my apartment was broken into. No valuables stolen, no forced entry. But the place had been disturbed, drawers, open scripts, unrolled hard drives, unplugged. I reported it to the police, but nothing came of it. Then, while staying at a friend's place during repairs, I received a text from an unfamiliar number. "Some lights are better off dimmed. Stay quiet, Emma." I sat with that message for hours. Deleted it, blocked the number. But I knew what it meant. And yet, I still told myself I was being paranoid. I even agreed to meet Lila for lunch. I convinced myself it was about staying civil, maintaining peace. We sat at a trendy vegan cafe in Palo Alto. Lila arrived late as usual, draped in designer denim, and smiling as if nothing in the world could ever truly touch her. "How's the film going?" she asked, picking at her avocado toast. "I paused production," I said. "Funding issues." She pouted. "Ugh, people just don't appreciate art anymore. Maybe you need to get a little more digestible, relatable." That's how I built my brand. I nodded, pretending to take the advice. Then I asked, "By the way, do you know a guy named Owen Crane?" Her fork paused midair. Just a flicker. Then she smiled. "Oh, yeah. He used to intern for one of my PR teams." Funny, because Owen was the managing editor of the online magazine that ran the hit piece on me. I didn't push it. I simply filed the moment away. The final blow came 2 weeks before the wedding. I was preparing to pitch a new docuseries concept to a streaming platform. A friend had secured the meeting for me. It was a huge break, potentially career-changing. The morning of the meeting, I received an anonymous Dropbox link. Inside, screen recordings of a Slack conversation between platform execs. One message read, "Her sister says she plays fast and loose with ethics. Bad optics. We should pass." I stared at the screen in shock. The name of the sender Lila B brand team. It was right there. No pretense, no disguise. I called my old friend Marcus, one of Lila's former content editors. We hadn't spoken in over a year. He sounded hesitant, but agreed to meet. Over coffee, he looked me in the eye and said, "Emma, I don't know exactly how deep it goes, but I'll say this. Your sister doesn't just want to shine. She wants to shine alone. Every time you gain momentum, she got nervous. Started asking me to monitor your channels, pull social metrics, even offered me a bonus to pitch stories about filmmaking frauds to influencer T pages." He paused. "I left her team because it got weird. You were never the villain, but she needed one." I thanked him. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I simply went home and started collecting emails, screenshots, video messages, meeting cancellations, anonymous comments that matched Lila's writing style, invoices, timelines, everything. I turned it all into a digital archive. Then I sat down with my grandfather, Henry Blake, retired journalist, truth seeker, and the only adult in our family who had never once asked me to dim myself for someone else's comfort. He listened without interrupting. When I was done, he said, "Don't go to war, Emma. Tell a story. And tell it well." The first real crack appeared during Lila's bridal shower. It was held at a vineyard in Napa Valley, organic, curated, perfectly Instagrammable. I arrived in a muted linen dress that Lila's event stylist called earthy but underwhelming. Lila wore white lace and a flower crown surrounded by 30 women in coordinated neutrals. The kind of event where every table had a hashtag and every moment was sponsored. I kept my distance. I smiled for the group photo. I played the part of the loving big sister. But something felt off. Near the end of the day, I stepped away from the main patio to take a call. That's when I heard her voice, "Lila," on the other side of a hedge, speaking low and fast. "No, she doesn't know. But the archive's been wiped. Make sure all backups are cleared before the wedding." A pause. Then laughter. "Relax. She's not clever enough to trace it." My stomach dropped. I froze, not moving until I heard footsteps retreating and the murmur of filtered laughter. Later that evening, when I casually asked Lila about her call, she laughed it off. "Oh, just my brand consultant. We're overhauling my site." The old footage didn't match the new vibe. I nodded, but the words kept echoing. She's not clever enough to trace it. The next morning, I checked the backup drive I always kept synced to my Dropbox account. Over 60 files, draft cuts, raw footage, and grant proposal PDFs had been quietly deleted from the shared archive. When I reached out to Dropbox support, they confirmed the files had been accessed and permanently removed 3 days earlier from an IP registered to a co-working space in LA, the same building Lila used as her content hub. It couldn't be a coincidence. I called my grandfather that night. He listened, then asked me one question. "Why do you still sound like you're trying to protect her?" I didn't have an answer. At the rehearsal dinner, the tension became physical. I was seated at the far end of a long outdoor table next to a florist's intern and Ben's second cousin, who had a loud laugh and a louder suit. I tried to ignore the sparkle of Lila's laughter floating across the candlelight. Midway through the meal, I excused myself to the restroom. As I stepped into the hallway of the estate's private dining wing, I nearly collided with someone. It was Marcus. Not the editor I had spoken to a few weeks ago, but Marcus Ford, a brand strategist Lila had dated briefly last year and who now worked in New York. He looked surprised. "Emma, I didn't know you'd be here." "I'm the sister of the bride," I said with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "What about you?" His pause was long. "Lila invited me as a plus one. Said someone dropped out." I nodded slowly. A few seconds later, Lila appeared. "There you are," she said, sliding her arm through Marcus's with practiced ease. "Oh, Emma, you met Marcus." "He saved the table tonight. It would have been awkward with 13 guests." She laughed. Marcus avoided my eyes. And in that moment, something clicked. This wasn't random. None of it was. Lila didn't just want to shine, she wanted control. Over stories, over people, over me. And this wedding wasn't a celebration. It was a stage. After the rehearsal dinner, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in the guest cottage on the vineyard estate, staring at the ceiling fan, the sound of distant laughter still echoing in my ears. The pieces were all there. All the canceled opportunities, the deleted files, the warped gossip articles, the manipulated social media narratives, Marcus's sudden appearance, and most of all, Leela's smirk when I caught her mid-lie. I didn't want to believe it. I still wanted to believe my little sister loved me, that maybe she was just careless, a little self-absorbed, not malicious. But love doesn't sabotage. That night, I opened my laptop and compiled every strange incident from the past 2 years into a single document. I lined up names, dates, digital footprints. I logged email headers, IP addresses, social media activity. I compared timestamps. I flagged overlaps. I began seeing patterns. And then I saw the silent architecture of a campaign. It was more than sabotage, it was strategy. The next morning, I called my grandfather. He answered after the first ring. "You were right," I said. "I usually am," he replied. "Want to tell me about it?" I did. For the next 30 minutes, I told him everything. The blog posts, the deleted files, the staged plus ones, the faked concern, the erased backup drives. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he said, "Emma, it's time you remember what you do best." "I tell stories," I replied quietly. He said, "Exactly. So tell this one." I hung up and went to work. First, I reached out to Devin Lang, one of Lila's former videographers. We'd met once briefly on a shoot. He had left her team the previous year quietly and without public explanation. He responded to my message in less than an hour. We met at a quiet cafe outside San Francisco. Devin was in his late 20s, scruffy, and carried a GoPro bag like a security blanket. When I asked him why he left, he looked around, lowered his voice, and said, "Because I didn't want to be part of ruining people anymore." He opened his laptop and showed me a folder of screenshots he'd quietly collected. Instructions from Lila's brand manager to stage hate comments on competitors' pages. Scripts sent to her assistants to write fake Reddit threads about problematic women in film. Email threads that included photos of me with the subject line, "Narrative risk to Lila's positioning." I felt sick. Devin continued, "She had us keep tabs on you, your viewership, your grant cycles, your festival submissions. If you gained any traction, she'd find a way to undermine it. Quietly. Strategically. She said it was just business, that she was protecting her platform. From me, I asked. She called you the quiet threat," Devin said. "You had substance, credibility." That scared her. I thanked him. He offered to testify if it ever came to that. I didn't want legal battles. I wanted the truth to speak for itself. That evening, I called Marcus, the brand strategist Lila had brought to the rehearsal dinner. He answered on the second ring. "Emma," he said, his voice hesitant. "Relax," I told him. "I'm not here to destroy you. I just want to know the truth." There was silence. Then he said, "She told me you were spiraling, that you tried to sue her, that you were jealous of the wedding. And you believed her." "I did," he admitted, "until I saw your expression last night. Do you have access to anything?" "A few DMs. One of her assistants accidentally added me to a shared cloud folder. I didn't open it at the time. I didn't want to get involved. I asked him to check. He did. That folder contained over 300 documents. Many were media planning decks and marketing assets. but others were darker. One file was titled Pre-Wedding Narrative Control. It was a strategy PDF outlining anticipated Emma threats, including a projected timeline of emotional volatility, suggested response language, and contingency press statements in the unlikely event that Emma speaks out. Another included fake tweets drafted in my voice portraying me as unstable, bitter, and envious. And then there was the spreadsheet, a long color-coded document tracking every professional contact I'd interacted with in the last 5 years, complete with notes on how Lila or her team had managed perception of me across various platforms. The evidence was undeniable. She hadn't just tried to outshine me, she had erased me. The final straw came when I opened a folder titled Legacy Cleanup. Inside was a list of platforms Lila wanted to phase out, including multiple references to articles or short films I'd created that had once featured her. One line read, "Secure takedown of all Emma x Lila content. Distance brand from irrelevant sibling associations." Irrelevant. That word echoed in my head. I shut the laptop, took a deep breath, and picked up my phone. My grandfather answered immediately. "Tomorrow's the wedding," I said. "Yes." "Do you still have that old mini projector?" I asked. He chuckled. "You're going to make them watch. I'm going to make them see." He paused. "You sure?" "No," I said, "but I'm done being silent." The next day I edited a short film. 8 minutes. That's all I needed. It opened with a shot of Lila and me at ages 5 and 8 sitting on a swing set laughing. Then came the commentary. Audio clips, screenshots, interview segments with Marcus and Devin, metadata on emails, overlay text quoting the strategy documents. No narration. Just facts. No rage. Just proof. It ended with a simple title card. This is what happens when one woman is forced to erase herself for another to shine. I encrypted the file, uploaded it to an unlisted video channel, and scheduled the release for 7:45 p.m., exactly 1 hour after dinner began. Then I downloaded the file onto my grandfather's tablet and asked for just one favor. "Make sure this plays," I said. He nodded. "And you?" "I'll be in the room," I said, "but I won't say a word. Not until the lights dim." The morning of the wedding was warm, bright, and dripping with curated joy. The ceremony was held at an oceanfront estate in Montecito. Guests arrived in shuttles wrapped in white florals. Every detail had been manicured to fit Lila's aesthetic vintage modern, with a hint of legacy wealth. I overheard one planner mutter that the wedding had 5 separate hashtags, each tied to a sponsor. Lila wanted a spectacle, not a celebration. I arrived early. My grandfather Henry pulled into the private staff lot and opened the trunk. Inside was his old leather briefcase. Inside that, the tablet, fully charged, preloaded, auto-cued. We rehearsed one last time. He would excuse himself from the dinner table at 7:30 sharp, walk into the reception booth where the slideshow technician was stationed, and ask to test a tribute for the father of the bride. My dad wasn't involved in the planning, so there wouldn't be a script to contradict. At 7:45, the slideshow would play. In full. No voiceover. No context. Just the truth. "Are you sure you're okay with this?" he asked, tucking the tablet beneath his jacket. "I'm not doing it for revenge," I said. "I'm doing it because I want to stop being erased." He nodded. I dressed simply. Navy silk, low heels, minimal makeup. Lila's stylist had assigned colors to key women in the family, but no one had mentioned anything to me. I didn't mind. The ceremony itself was flawless. Lila walked down the aisle in custom Vera Wang lips, trembling, voice sweet. The sun hit the sea just right. She looked radiant. Even I could admit that. Ben smiled like a man who hadn't yet discovered his wife's shadow was larger than her light. After the ceremony, I mingled politely, sipping sparkling water and avoiding cameras. Lila floated from group to group, radiant and triumphant, her arm coiled around our mothers like a trophy. When dinner began, I found my seat at a distant table again, flanked by Ben's childhood neighbor, and a woman who ran a Lila fan account. I ate slowly, made conversation, and watched the clock. 7:00 p.m. The toasts began. The best man, Ben's college roommate, made a few charming jokes. Then Amber, Lila's brand manager turned maid of honor, gave a heartfelt but strategically worded speech about resilience, reinvention, and never letting anyone dim your sparkle. Lila cried on cue. 7:20 p.m. My mother stood. She wore silver chiffon and too much lipstick. Her glass of champagne trembled slightly in her hand. To the daughter who truly deserves everything she said. The crowd applauded. Lila smirked. I didn't flinch. 7:29 p.m. Henry excused himself, said something about the restroom, walked out slowly, confidently. 7:44 p.m. The screen behind the head table lit up. No announcement, no warning. Just a blank black screen. A hush fell. The first frame appeared two girls aged 5 and 8 on a swing set laughing. Then stillness. Then over the next 8 minutes, screenshots, emails, text threads, Slack messages, fake tweet drafts, a list titled Emma Reputation Management. Lila's voice came in next, recorded, clipped, undeniable. She's not clever enough to trace it. The room was silent, utterly still. Only the hum of the projector and the faint rhythmic tap of someone's ring against a champagne flute could be heard. I watched Lila's face from across the room. Her smile faltered. Her fingers curled under the tablecloth. Ben leaned toward her, whispering something. She didn't respond. Then the final frame. This is what happens when one woman is forced to erase herself for another to shine. The screen went black. For a beat, no one moved. Then the whispers started. Phones buzzed, notifications pinged. The film had gone live, automatically uploaded to YouTube, Vimeo, and Twitter. Auto-shared to Lila's own Facebook through a hacked link I had scheduled using an old admin password, one I knew she'd never changed. The footage was unlisted, but by the time someone noticed, it had already been screen recorded and uploaded by at least a dozen media watchers. And then, like a detonation in slow motion, the room fractured. Ben stood up. He turned to Lila. Is it true? He asked. She shook her head, small, tight, defensive. She's lying. My mother tried to intervene, voice strained. This is some kind of mistake. Emma's always had a dramatic streak, but the weight of the evidence didn't care about denial. Ben looked at me. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I simply stood, took my clutch from the back of the chair, and walked toward the door. And as I stepped outside into the open air, I could still hear the quiet of realization descending behind me like a curtain. The show was over. Now came the reckoning. I didn't look back. We stepped off the reception lawn and into the waiting car my grandfather had arranged earlier that afternoon. He was already inside, silent eyes forward. We drove in quiet until we reached the small inn just outside town. As I reached for the door handle, he spoke. That was brave, he said. That was necessary, I replied. That night I slept deeply for the first time in months. The fallout began before sunrise. By morning, the short film had hit 100,000 views. By noon, it was featured on 2 digital culture blogs. By the end of the day, the hashtags from the wedding were drowned beneath a new one. Sister erased. I didn't speak publicly. I didn't post, didn't tweet, didn't answer messages from journalists. I didn't need to. The evidence had already spoken. My inbox filled with messages, some from colleagues who had once distanced themselves, now offering apologies or praise. Others came from strangers, women who had been undermined by siblings, mothers, bosses. Women who said my story gave them permission to name what they'd been afraid to name. Not all messages were kind. Lila's fan base was still large and loud. They accused me of jealousy, of revenge, of ruining a sacred day. But even their voices began to fade under the weight of the facts. Ben moved out of the marital home within 3 days. His statement, brief, restrained, was posted to his professional page. I am processing recent revelations and taking time to reflect. I remain committed to integrity in all areas of my life. Lila, however, responded quickly. On day 4, she released a video titled My Truth. She sat on a cream velvet chair wrapped in a pale cashmere shawl, eyes glossy. I never meant to hurt anyone, she said. Family is complicated. Fame is harder than people think. I've always loved my sister, but she struggled with resentment. The video was 14 minutes long. It was deleted within 2 hours. Screenshots lived forever. More former employees came forward. Her former assistant, a videographer, a graphic designer, a brand consultant. Each had a story. Each had documents. Meanwhile, I remained quiet. I returned to Oakland. I went back to work. A week later, I received a message from Sundance. My previously withdrawn pitch, one I thought had been lost forever, was back under review. An organizer wrote, "We'd love to talk." But the biggest surprise came from my mother. She called the day after Lila's video collapsed. "Emma," she began, "this has gone too far. I know Lila's not perfect, but airing all this publicly, it's cruel. It's family." I listened, quiet, detached. She went on, "You've always had this need to prove something, to correct people. But this time, you've destroyed your sister. Don't you see that?" And there it was, her real fear, not Lila's cruelty, but Lila's collapse. "I didn't destroy her," I said. "She did that on her own." I just stopped helping her hide it. She didn't respond. She hung up a few seconds later. That was the last time we spoke that month. My grandfather and I debriefed every few days. He tracked media coverage, flagged incoming threats or strange emails. He never said, "I told you so." He simply helped me stay grounded. Then came the letter. From Ben, typed, printed, signed in ink. He wrote, "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. You didn't deserve what happened. I'm grateful you told the truth. I believe you saved me from a lifetime of never knowing who I was really married to." I didn't reply, but I kept the letter. 6 weeks after the wedding, Lila vanished from social media. No posts, no stories, no appearances. Just silence. 2 weeks later, she reemerged in a different way. I received an email with no subject line, from a new address. It read, "I'm seeing a therapist. She says I have narcissistic traits. I don't know if that's true. I'm trying. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need you to know that I'm trying to understand why I did what I did. I'm sorry, Emma. L." I didn't reply. Not yet. Because forgiveness isn't a button you press. It's a process. And for once, I didn't feel rushed to finish it. Fall arrived in Northern California with soft rain and yellowing trees. By then, the internet had moved on. The headlines faded. Hashtags shifted. Lila's name stopped trending. What remained was quieter, the slow rebuilding of a life no longer twisted around someone else's spotlight. I moved into a small craftsman house on a tree-lined street near Lake Merritt. It had a covered porch and a reading nook, and in the mornings you could hear the low hum of rowers on the lake. My grandfather lived 5 blocks away and came by often with sourdough bread or old books he thought I should read again with new eyes. We didn't talk about the wedding anymore. Instead, we talked about ideas, about stories, about healing. One afternoon, while unpacking a final box from my old apartment, I found a short film I'd never released. It was from years ago, shot on a handheld camera. No editing, just raw interviews with women in their 30s talking about their relationships with sisters. I watched all 27 minutes. In one clip, a woman named Dana said, "There's a grief in being the invisible one, a grief that doesn't come with funerals. It's just silence. And no one sends flowers for that." I cried when I heard that again, because that grief was mine too. But I didn't feel invisible anymore, not because I'd made noise, but because I had finally told the truth. The truth has its own weight. It doesn't need volume. It settles into a room and reshapes what people think is real. That's what happened in the weeks after the wedding. People saw me, not as Lila's sister, not as the quiet one, but as someone who had endured and risen and spoken. I accepted the Sundance invitation, not just for the docuseries pitch they'd renewed interest in, but to lead a panel on narrative erasure and digital image control. It was the first time I'd spoken publicly since the wedding. When I stepped onto the stage in Park City, I looked out into a sea of faces, filmmakers, journalists, activists, students. Not all of them knew my story, but enough did. I told them this. Sometimes the hardest thing you'll ever do is not fight back with rage, but stand still with your truth and let the silence fall where it may. I didn't tell my story to shame someone. I told it to unbury myself. They stood when I finished, but the standing ovation wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that I no longer shook when I said my name, Emma Blake, not Lila's sister, just me. My professional life bloomed slowly then all at once. The documentary I had begun writing during the worst of the sabotage about unseen women, undermined women, received full funding from a new women-led foundation. I assembled a team of editors and producers I trusted. Many had their own stories of being muted by brighter, louder people. We called the project Unmuted. But something else changed too. My definition of family. Lila remained distant. Her therapist reached out once asking if I would consider attending a joint session. I declined for now. My mother sent a single Christmas card. No message inside, just her name. But my grandfather came every Sunday. Margaret Ben's cousin, now a friend, invited me to monthly dinners with a group of women who had all once lived in someone else's shadow. We laughed louder than I had in years. That December, I hosted a small dinner party at my new house. 6 people, no cameras, no fanfare, just real conversation. As the evening settled and the candles melted low, I stood and lifted my glass. "I want to make a toast," I said. The table quieted. To the daughter who learned that family isn't who claps for you the loudest. It's who stays when the room goes quiet. To the woman who told the truth and reclaimed her place, not in someone else's story, but in her own. They raised their glasses. We drank. And no one smiled for a photo. We just smiled. It's been 1 year since my sister's wedding. A year since I stood up in a room full of people who never expected me to speak. Since I released a story I never wanted to tell but knew I had to. A lot can happen in a year. The documentary Unmuted premiered this spring. We sold out opening night at the Roxy Theater in San Francisco. A woman in her 60s hugged me after the screening and whispered thank you for saying what so many of us couldn't. We're now in pre-production for a limited series adaptation. I'm executive producing. For the first time, no one's asking me to stay in the background. My team is made up entirely of women who've walked through fire, who've had their names misused, their voices borrowed, their ideas stolen. We meet every Tuesday. We talk about healing as much as we talk about lighting and framing, somewhere in the quiet of it all. I met someone. His name is Jacob. He's not in the industry. He runs a local nonprofit that builds community gardens in underfunded neighborhoods. He listens more than he talks, and he never once asked me about Lila. When I told him my story, he didn't say, "That's crazy." He said, "That's familiar. We're not rushing anything." I'm done rushing. My grandfather is still sharp as ever. We walk every Friday around the lake. He tells me stories from his newspaper days, the ones he never printed. He says the most dangerous stories are the ones we keep quiet to protect the wrong people. He's the one who reminded me again and again that silence is a strategy sometimes useful, but often deadly. I've come to understand something else too. Lila wasn't born a villain. She became one slowly fed by a culture that rewards volume over value, presence over principle. She was trained to believe that attention equals love and that control equals safety. And our mother, whether knowingly or not, reinforced those beliefs at every turn. But I'm not here to diagnose her or excuse her. I'm here to close the chapter. The last message I received from Lila came 2 weeks ago. It said only this: "I'm moving, off the grid for a while. I'm sorry for more than I can say. I hope one day you'll believe that. I don't know if I do. And that's okay. Healing isn't always forgiveness. Sometimes it's permission to stop needing it." I still haven't responded. I may never. And that's not cruelty, it's clarity. Some stories don't end with reconciliation. Some end with peace. My mother hasn't apologized, but she did forward an email recently, an old photo of me holding a camcorder at 9 years old, standing in the backyard in muddy sneakers directing my cousins in a reenactment of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. No message, just the photo. I printed it and framed it in my new office, a reminder that I've always known how to tell stories. I just needed to remember that I was allowed to tell my own. So if you're still watching, still listening, still here, maybe you've been the sister in the shadow, maybe you've been the woman at the edge of the table. Maybe you've spent years being polite when what you needed was to be heard. Let me say this now not as an ending, but as a beginning. You are not invisible. Your truth is not too much. Your voice is not too late. I thought exposing my sister would be the most important moment of my life, but it wasn't. The most important moment was the day I stopped trying to be the good one, the quiet one, the tolerable one. The day I stopped asking for space and claimed it. If my story has meant anything to you, I hope it's this. You don't need a wedding toast to name your worth. You just need one clear breath, one brave second, and the decision to stop disappearing. And when you do, you will never go back.